Hello everybody and welcome to the Abandoned Places Iceberg Part 2. In the Part 2 I want to cover all the tiers that are left from 6 till 10 and see what it has in store for us. I'm really happy with the view count from the first video. It ain't much, but I'm really happy that someone did watch it. And right before we start, I just want to say something. In the Iceberg, there's a lot of entries like an abandoned ships or sunken ships. I don't know what the creator meant by that, but like the Titanic in the last video and some other sunken ships. It's really strange because you can just add a lot of sunken ships that you can explore, like divers can explore. And the Bismarck or some other sunken ship. So I don't think abandoned places should be sunken ships because they're too much around in the world. So I don't know, the creator made it like that, so let's go. We're starting the tier 6 with our first entry, Rumu Prison. The ruins of the abandoned prison camp outside the small Estonian town of Rumu were once dreaded stone edifice, but now a beach attraction. The prison was already established in the 1940s by the Soviet Union. It was built in a convenient location on a lip of limestone quarry, which the inmates were forced to toil. The seemingly impenetrable walls of the prison will not last forever. When Estonia regained its independence in 1991, the Soviets moved out and many of their institutions fell, including the labor prison at Rumu. Both the prison and the quarry were abandoned in the changeover. Without anyone to look after the natural groundwater that seeded into the former quarry, it soon filled up with water, creating a new lake with alarming speed. It filled up so fast that many of the mining machines and even some of the buildings were swallowed whole by the rising water. Today, some of the former prison can be still seen on land as part of the structure stick out from the crystal clear like waters. The spot has become a prime location for divers and adventurous beachgoers who come for the sunken ruins beneath the waters. One of the most unusual sights of Colombia is the abandoned South Hotel. It's located in incredibly beautiful natural surroundings close to the Tequendama Falls. This natural attraction began to attract people more than 100 years ago. Travelers from around the world admired it. In 1926, it was decided to build a hotel next to the waterfall. The luxury facility has been working for more than 60 years. Then it was closed due in profitability. The hotel was built on the edge of a steep cliff. When the edifice was closed, the wilderness began to attract suiciders. No official statistics on the suicide is collected, but according to unofficial information, several dozen of people have died there by their own hands. One of the worst legends about the abandoned hotel is related to the souls of the dead. Some travelers, when visiting the empty building, have seen large silhouettes and heard some kind of human speech, but no one was in the building. People come here not only to see the beautiful waterfall, but also in hope to watch the ghost. Starjet roller coaster. Well, there isn't a lot of information. It's not something that is that insane, or I don't know why it's even in tier 6, but basically the Starjet roller coaster is in the Casino Pier in New Jersey, and it was built in 2002, and in 2012 was badly damaged by Hurricane Sandy. But despite being thrown into the ocean, the structure of Starjet remained largely intact. In 2013, the roller coaster was removed from the ocean and it was torn down. As I said, nothing interesting, but we're going to continue. Ho To Wan is an abandoned fishing village in the northern side of Shengshan Island, one of the Sheng Sea Islands, in the chain of 400 islands located 64 kilometers east of Shanghai, China. The village was once home of more than 2,000 fishermen, but was completely abandoned in the early 1990s due to problems with education and food delivery. Since its abandonment, the once bustling village has become overtaken by greenery. Today, the village is home to only a handful of people, but is a popular tourist attraction. Nicosia International Airport is a largely disused airport located west of the capital city Nicosia in Cyprus. The last commercial airline flight out of Nicosia Airport took place in 1977 under the UN Special Authorization. Following the Turkish invasion, the airport was a scene of some of the heaviest fighting between Cypriot and Turkish forces, which led the United Nations Security Council to declare it a United Nations protected area during the conflict. This required both sides to withdraw at least 500 meters from the perimeter of the airport. With the ceasefire signed on August 1974, Nicosia Airport became part of the United Nations controlled buffer zone, separating the two communities on the island. There have been some plans for Nicosia Airport to be reopened under the United Nations as a goodwill measure, but as far neither the Greek or neither the Turkish have seriously pursued the option. In 2013, Michael Parakos of the Coronado Institute in Cyprus argued that the old Nicosia airport would no longer be needed in events of political settlement in the island, due to being there other functional airports in Cyprus. The city of Uyuni is located in the southeastern Bolivia, south of the capital La Paz. It is the main gateway to the Uyuni Salt Flats, or the Sadar de Uyuni, the world's largest salt flats, over 10,000 square kilometers. Uyuni was founded in 1819 as a trading post. Its position between the Andes made it convenient crossing point between Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. The railway system was originally built by the British Mining Company between 1888 and 1892 and encouraged by Bolivian authorities who believed that the country would flourish with a good transport system and connection to the Pacific posts. The railway carried materials from the mines to the Pacific Post, and Uyuni became an important transport hub. After World War II, the mining industry in Bolivia collapsed and many of the mines closed and had simply been exhausted. The trains that have been used to carry the materials were left abandoned in the salt flats outside Uyuni. SS Airfield Ship's Wreck. Originally launched as SS Korimal, the massive 1,140-ton steel beast was built in 1911 in the UK and registered in Sydney in 1912 as a steam collier, which was later used to transport supplies to American troops stationed in the Pacific region during World War II. The ship went to serve as a collier between Newcastle and Miller Terminal in Blackwater Bay. Eventually, in 1972, the SS Airfield was retired and went to Homebush Bay, which has served as a shipbreaking yard. While many ships were taken apart, about 4 metallic bodies of vessels are over 100 years old, currently floating in the bay, though none of them enveloped by nature quite like the airfield. The ship has continued to attract visitors to its majestic presence. Crystal Palace Subway is a beautifully designed and crafted relic of the Victorian construction. Hidden under the Crystal Palace Parade, it was built to provide access to the Crystal Palace. The Crystal Palace was a cast iron and plate of glass building originally erected in Hyde Park, close to the Great Exhibition of 1851. After the exhibition, it was rebuilt in an enlarged form at the top of the Sydenham Hill. It provided a popular attraction and stood from 1854 until its destruction by fire in 1936. Access to the palace was provided from two railway stations. The Crystal Palace low-level station is opened in 1856, from which passengers have to walk uphill some 500 yards. To increase capacity and reduce the walking distance, a new high-level station was designed by Charles Barry and opened in 1865 on the western side of Crystal Palace Parade. The line was operated by London, Chatham and Dover Railway Companies, though built by the Crystal Palace and South London Junction Railway Company. Torre de David is an unfinished abandoned skyscraper in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela. It is the third highest skyscraper in the country after the Twin Tower of Parque Central complex. The construction of the tower began in 1990s, but it was halted in 1994 due to the Venezuelan banking crisis. As of 2018, the building's remains incomplete and unused. It was damaged due to the two earthquakes in August 2018. The tower's main investor, who died from cancer in 1993, during the banking crisis in 1994, the government took control of the building and it was not being completed since. The building lacks elevators, installed electricity, running water, balcony railings, and windows. Even the walls in many places. Neglected for more than a decade, the 45-story, 190-meter tall skyscraper became makeshift home for a community of more than 800 families, becoming the world's tallest vertically organized favela, with basic services up to the 22nd floor and including even a barbershop, kindergartens, and dentists. Now we move into Tier 7. I think this entry refers to the Cape Romano dome houses in the Marco Islands. Maybe that's it, so I'll talk about them. The Cape Romano dome houses was an abandoned house consisting of 6 dome-shaped modules on stilts, located offshore from Cape Romano Island, south of Marco Islands, Florida. Cape Romano dome houses were built in 1981, and in Bob Lee's initial conception, the eccentric vacation home was to be self-sufficient, eco-friendly relaxation spot for his family. Among the innovations at the site are the raised units themselves, which should be heated by lighting fires among the concrete, and the dome-shaped roofs, which would direct rainwater and will be collected and used for showering and dishwater. The home changed ownership several times, with most recent ownerships by the state of Florida since 2018. On September 2022, the structures became submerged in underwater due to Hurricane Ian. Saturn Unique Tower is an unfinished skyscraper in the Thai capital city of Bangkok. Planned as a high-rise condominium complex, construction of the building was halted during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, when it was already about 80% complete. It is now amongst the most prominent of Bangkok's many derelict buildings and has become a destination for urban explorers. The Saturn Unique was planned as a 47-story luxury condominium tower. The project was launched in 1990 and it was owned by Saturn Unique Co. and mainly financed by the Thai Mex Finance and security companies. Construction began in the same year, and in 1993, in a controversial case that would drag on for 15 years, Rangsant was found guilty in 2008 and the financial support for his project has stopped and he was left behind. Well, this entry is kinda weird. Ponyhenge is just like a collection of 30 toy rocking horses. The toy rocking horses are just spread like in a circle, and that's it. It's nothing special. So we're gonna continue. Anping Tree Houses is a former warehouse in Anping District, Tainan, Taiwan. The tree house name refers to the living banyan roots and branches that cover the building. Built around the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the Japanese colonial period, this place was also a warehouse of the Japanese South Corporation, and the current scale of the building is the product of the extension by the Japanese. After over 100 years ago of transformation, the warehouse walls are covered in banyan roots, and the dense towering tripod seems to have become the roof of the warehouse. This unusual appearance gives the Anping tree houses a sense of mystery. The gaps between the tree trunks make perfect walkways for people to walk through, and one can also travel among the tree tops. The tree houses is also a good habitat for wildlife, and lots of squirrels and birds live there. Naval Museum Complex Balaklava is an underground submarine base in Balaklava, Crimea. It was a top-secret military facility during the Cold War, located in Balaklava Bay. Today it serves as a museum and also houses a museum about the Crimean War. The base was built for hiding, repairing and maintaining submarines for the 613 and the 633rd Division, as well as for storage for ammunition for the submarines. The channel of the facility is 602 meters long and could accommodate 7 submarines of these projects. About 120,000 tons of rocks were removed during the construction. The removal was made at night on barges under the condition of complete secrecy. The complex also includes the repair and technical base designed for the storage and maintenance of the nuclear weapons. The temperature inside the base is around 50 degrees. After the complex was closed in 1993, most of the complex is unguarded. The abandoned facility was handed over to the naval forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in 2000. The bay fell into a despair and it was plummeted for scraps before it became a museum in 2003. Kangbashi Ordos, China. Well, this entry, maybe when the creator of the Iceberg did it, was abandoned, but now everything is okay. But let's just say when it was abandoned, it was just because of lack of funding, and now it's a booming city, so I don't consider it an abandoned place, so I'm going to move on. St. George's Church. Well, I think this entry refers to the same St. George's Church as in the last video, so because the place is the same and it's in the same country, so I've already talked about it. Plaza Tower is a 45-story, 162-meter skyscraper in New Orleans, Louisiana. Located in the Central Business District, it is the third tallest building in both of the city of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. Construction of the plaza began in 1964 but halted in October in 1966. The property was bought out and construction resumed in 1968, and it was completed in 1969. The Plaza Tower was the tallest building in New Orleans for 4 years until One Shell Square surpassed it by 49 meters. The Plaza Tower was originally designed primarily as an office building with some residential space on the upper floors. Upon completion of the tower, very little residential space was made available. By 1984, the remaining residence apartments were made into offices. In 2001, Tenants began to publicly criticize the building's owners for ignoring the worsening conditions of the building. Claims were made that the lack of proper maintenance has led to the exposure of asbestos and toxic mold. Several class action lawsuits were filed by workers against the owners and managers of the buildings. The Louisiana Department of Social Service and Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals closed down the buildings. In 2002, approximately 700 office employees relocated to the offices on Common Street. Since that time, the building has been sealed off and unused. There's a couple of YouTube videos exploring the towers, so you should maybe check it out. Lake Reshen is an artificial lake in the western part of South Tyrol province, Italy. It's a 6 km long with a capacity of 120 million cubic meters of water. The lake is famous for the steeple of submerged 14th century church. When the water freezes, it can be reached on by foot. A legend says that during winter, one can still hear the church bell ringing. But in reality, the bells were removed from the tower in 1950, a week before the demolition of the central part of the church. Burj El Mur Tower began construction in 1974, a year prior to the start of a civil war. Due to it being the highest structure at the time, it ideally looked above the Green Line and divided the west and east Beirut. Militiamen utilized the tower during the conflict as a spot for snipers. Construction stopped in 1975 with the start of the Civil War, after the building had been topped out. The construction was never finished, and the tower stands out today as a dramatic symbol of the war times. And the last entry in this tier is a place that I really want to explore myself. That place is Buzluđa Monument. It is the monument house of the Bulgarian Communist Party, and it was built on Buzluđa Peak in central Bulgaria by the Bulgarian Communist government and inaugurated in 1981. It commemorated the events of 1891, when a group of socialists led by Dimitar Blagoev assembled secretly in the area to form an organized socialist movement that led the foundation of the Bulgarian Social Democratic Party, a forerunner of the Bulgarian Communist Party. Construction of the monument began on the 23rd of January 1974. The peak was leveled into stable foundation using a TNT, reducing the mountain's height from 1,441 meters to 1,432 meters, just 9-meter difference. Over 15,000 cubic meters of rock were removed in the process. The monument was built at the cost of 14 million leva, equivalent to $35 million today. The monument exemplifies the futuristic architecture common to many states considered communist buildings, or maybe brutalism if you like that way. All maintenance ended with the fall of the Communist Party in 1989, and the buildings remained closed to the public due to hazards of the weakened structure. Even though it's guarded, many people sneak inside throughout tunnels or some cracks throughout the walls and capture amazing photos. It's a popular site, you've seen a lot of pictures. And in 2015, a foundation named Project Buzluđa was created to help and restore Buzluđa. And in 2022, they started to renovate and preserve the monument. Now we're going into Tier 8. The Eastern State Penitentiary is a former American prison in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was operational from 1829 until 1971. The penitentiary refined the revolutionary system
of separate incarnation, first pioneered at the Walnut Street Jail, which emphasized principles of reform rather than punishment. Notorious criminals such as Al Capone and the bank robber Willie Sutton were held there. The building was the largest and most expensive public structure ever erected in the United States, and quickly became a model for more than 300 prisons worldwide. Originally, inmates were housed in cells that could only be accessed by entering through a small exercise yard attached to the back of the prison. Only a small portal just large enough for a mule to pass through opened into the cell blocks. This design proved impractical, and in the middle of construction, the cells were reconstructed that could allow prisoners to enter and leave the cell blocks through metal doors that were covered by a heavy wooden door to filter out the noise. The halls were designed to have the feel of a church. Outside the cell was an individual area for exercise, enclosed by high walls so prisoners could not communicate throughout the wall. Exercise time for each prisoner was synchronized so no two prisoners next to each other would be at the same time. Prisoners were allowed to garden and keep pets in their exercise yard. When a prisoner left his cell, an accompanying guard would wrap the hood over his head to prevent him from being recognized by other prisoners. The prison is currently a U.S. National Historic Park, which is open to the public as a museum for tours 7 days a week. Sarajevo Olympic Village. This village was built for the Winter Olympic Games in 1984, close to Dobrinja, a suburb of Sarajevo. Being not only the first Olympic to be held in the country, it was also the first time any Winter Olympic Games had ever been hosted in a socialist state or a nation which has spoke Slavic languages. Yugoslavia aimed to populate the city of Sarajevo with equally benefiting historic and transcending architecture to match the mark of the importance of this moment. To achieve such an architectural marvel of constructing a wholly new built environment for the Winter Olympic Games, some of the most innovative and accomplished architects from across Yugoslavia were brought together to work towards this collective goal. After the Games, it was a habitat for intellectuals, foreign students, and upper middle class members of society. During the siege of Sarajevo, the longest siege of the capital city in modern warfare, fighters of both sides took the mountain surroundings around the city, using the Olympic structures as battlements and storage for their fights and weapons. The bobsled track became an artillery stronghold for the Bosnian Serbs. Some defensive holes drilled by troops can still be seen on the track's concrete walls. The ski jumps, also sites for heavy fightings, remain unused. Only recently this area has been cleared off of landmines. Deception Island is an island in the South Shetland Islands close to the Antarctic Peninsula, with a large and usually safe natural harbor, which is occasionally troubled by an underlying active volcano. This island is a caldera of active volcanoes, which seriously damaged local scientific stations in 1967 and 1969. The island previously held a whaling station. It is now a tourist destination with over 15,000 visitors per year. 2 research stations are operated by Argentina and Spain during the summer season. The thing is, building and operating expensive equipment on an active volcano is a risky business. Even in this area, it's considered one of the safest harbors of the continent due to its large caldera. Erupting twice in 2 years, it demolished research centers and buried everything left behind in ash, including a cemetery occupied by 45 deceased whalers and a long deserted aircraft hangar. The islands use now administered under Antarctic Treaty System, and it's now a popular tourist attraction and a scientific outpost. The SS America was an ocean liner built in the 1940s for the United States lines. She carried many names in her 54 years between her construction and her shipwrecking in 1994. She served as the USS America, carrying this name 3 different times during her career. She had names also like the USS West Point, the SS Australis, the SS Italis, the SS Noga, the SS Alfredus, and the SS American Star. She served most notably in the passenger service as the USS America and as the Greek flag SS Australis. In February 1993, the ship has been sold yet again, with the intentions of being refitted to becoming a 5-star hotel ship in Thailand. Dry docking at the time revealed that despite of years of neglect, her hull has still remained in fairly good condition. In August, she was renamed American Star. Her propellers were removed and placed on the deck. The funnel and the bridge were repainted red, and the ladder were welded to the starboard. On the New Year's Eve in 1993, the American Star left Greece for one last time. The 100-day tow began. The American Star and the Neftegas 67 entered the thunderstorm in the Atlantic. The tow lines broke and 6 or more men sent aboard the American Star to reach the emergency tow lines. This proved unsuccessful. 2 other towboats were called to assist the Neftegas 67, but didn't help. On January 17, the crew aboard the American Star were successfully rescued by a helicopter. The American Star was left drifting. On January 18, the American Star ran around the west coast of the Canary Islands. The wreck deteriorated and completely collapsed into the sea. As of 2022, it's no longer visible on the ocean surface and has become an artificial reef. The Valley del Mulini, or the Valley of Mills, is a verdant grouping of modern ruins nested at the bottom of a deep Italian crevice in Sorrento. The deep crack in the rocks, which housed the crumbling buildings, originated during a huge eruption which devastated the Mediterranean area. The flour mills, built from stone as far back as the 13th century, took advantage of the constant stream at the bottom of the valley. They ground all the types of wheat needed by the Sorrentine people in the surrounding area. After the flour mills were successfully established, other early industrial outfits began springing up to take advantage of the waters at the bottoms. A sawmill was built which furnished the shaft used by local cabinet masters, and there was a wash house used by women for personal hygiene and laundering clothes. After milling of flour was largely shifted to a nearby pasta mill, the sunken area of industry became largely obsolete and the buildings were closed and abandoned in the 1940s. Since their closing, the brick buildings have been slowly taken over by aggressive greenery that thrives in the humid crevices. Al Madam is an inland town of the United Arab Emirates located at the intersection of Dubai and Hatta. In an area of desert south of Madam, a small desert development of houses and a mosque can be found, referred to locally as both Madam's Old Town and a ghost town. The area around Al Madam is also a home of a number of archaeological sites, including those of Jebel Buhalis, as well as a water system dating back to the 1st millennium BC. The Aniva Lighthouse is the most famous lighthouse in Russia. This abandoned lighthouse is difficult to reach. It's situated on a small rock called Sivucha near the rocky Cape Aniva. You can only go there by water. Construction started in June of 1937 and finished in October 1939, taking just over 2 years. Building this navigational structure was difficult. All of the construction material had to be delivered by water. Severe weather conditions didn't make the process any easier. As a result, the concrete tower, painted to match the surrounding rocks, was erected 31 meters high, with its stroboscopic lamp located 40 meters above the ground. The uneven lighthouse was well designed for living, even if its keepers had to work in an extreme condition. The basement was equipped with diesel engines and batteries. The ground floor housed the kitchen and the floor storage, while radio room equipment and watch room of the lighthouse were situated on the second floor. The living quarters, which could accommodate up to 12 people, were located on the third and fifth floor. The living quarters, which could accommodate up to 12 people, were located on the fourth and fifth floor, each floor having a separate room. The interior of the quarter was modest, 2 bunks bed and a small alcoves for personal belongings. Light came through the small peepholes through the windows. The 6th floor is where the storeroom used to be. The 7th floor housed the mechanics of the pneumatic siren, with its horn installed directly on the roof of the bay window. The 8th floor was used for fuel storage. In the 1990s, it was decided to make a naval lighthouse autonomous by re-equipping it to work with a nuclear power source. The radioscope generators were moved in 2006, and the lighthouse has been abandoned ever since. Often called the Atlantis of the East by travelers, the underwater city of Xicheng is a magnificent, mysterious time capsule of the Imperial China. Stone architecture dating to the Ming and Qing dynasties stands perfectly preserved 40 meters under Qiandao Lake in Zhejiang province, 400 kilometers south of Shanghai. The city was rediscovered in 2001 when the Chinese government organized an expedition to see what might remain of the lost metropolis. Interest and exploration increased further in 2011 when classic Chinese National Geography published some never-seen-before photographs and illustrations showing a small city, which measured about half a square kilometer, might have looked in its heyday. Expectations and underwater photographs have revealed that the city had 5 entrances, as opposed to the traditional 4, which 2 western-facing gates as well as gates in the other cardinal direction. The city's wide streets also have 265 archways featuring preserved stonework of lions, dragons, phoenix, and historical inscriptions, some which date back as far as the 17,000s. The city's walls are believed to date back to the 16th century. Despite being underwater, Xinjiang has remained as well preserved. The water actually protected from wind, rain, and sun erosion. We just finished Tier 8 and we're going into Tier 9. The incomplete submarine shelter Pavlovskoye, formerly known as Secret Object Number 6, stands deserted on the coast of Peter the Great Bay in Primorye region of Russia. The concrete structure with semicircular arcs dates back to the time of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union and the USA were engaged in a nuclear arms race. It was intended as a submarine base for a Pacific fleet, and it's situated 19 kilometers from Nakhodka, one of the ports of the region. It's located within a base of both Ministry of Defense and the Pacific Fleet. Pavlovskoye was designed to provide shelter for Pacific Fleet submarines in the event of a nuclear attack. Construction allegedly began in the 1960s, although some sources claim that dates as late as 1977. It is impossible to confirm the starting date with any certainty because of secrecy surrounding the operation. Construction work started to slow down in the 1980s due to lack of funds and was finally brought to a halt when the Soviet Union collapsed. A significant factor in the discontinuation of the construction efforts was the start First, the first of the strategic arm reductions treaties between the Soviet Union and the USA. START 1 was designed on July 31st of 1991, just 4 months before the Soviet Union collapsed. It's aimed to achieve the reduction and limitation of strategic offensive arms. The Soviets were obliged to close the entrances of some of their underground structures to any maritime object, as well to stop building of such structures. Wonderland was an unfinished amusement park project located in Chengjuang village in Beijing, China. Originally proposed by the Thailand-based property developer Rainwood Group and designed to be the largest amusement park in Asia, construction stopped in 1998 following the financial problems in Asia, while a 2008 attempt to start the construction also failed. The site featured a number of abandoned structures, including framework of a castle-like building and medieval-themed outer buildings. Land was claimed by local farmers to grow their various crops, while the site was abandoned. People have reported when visiting the site that sometimes there would still be parking attendees in the site's parking lot, presumably to let the onlookers and curious sightseers come to visit. The abandonment of such massive construction project raised concerns about the existence of property bubble in China. The incomplete and abandoned structures were demolished in May of 2013, leaving no hope for the abandoned park to ever be finished. While there was no official indication of what would be done with the grounds, there was a park once stood. An Feng, Rainwood Group's chief inspector of the company's investment supervisor department, started a comprehensive luxury product market. So a luxury supermarket. But at that time, the project was still going through the planning permissions formalities. Sinop Fortress Prison was a state prison situated inside of the Sinop Fortress in Sinop, Turkey. As one of the oldest prisons in Turkey, established in 1887 within the inner fortress of the century-old fortification located northwest part of Cape Sinop. The prison was closed down in 1997 and the inmates were transferred into a modern nearby built prison in Sinop. The prison was considered as a high-security penitentiary with no escape possibility due to its position within a fortress. The top of the walls of the inner fortress served as a patrolling prisoners' guards walkway. The living conditions in the prisoners were difficult even to light a match. Were very harsh due to moisture by the location of the prison, very close to the sea. In the beginning of the 20th century, a rehabilitation program was set up for the prisoners. The inmates were given an opportunity to learn and practice handicrafts such as woodworking and jewelry. That embedded them to potter and earn money from the items they produced. The prison was abandoned on the December 6, 1997 after the inmates were transferred to a newly built prison. The Zhangji UFO houses, also known as the UFO houses of Zhangjin or the Zhangjin pod houses, were a set of abandoned and never completed pod-shaped buildings in Taiwan. The buildings resembled Furuto houses, some examples which can be found elsewhere in Taiwan. The UFO houses were constructed in the beginning of 1978. They were intended as a vacation resort and were marked towards the US military officers coming from their East Asian posting. However, the project was abandoned in the 1980s due to investment losses and several car accidents, deaths and suicides during constructions, which is said to be neglecting the Chinese dragon sculpture located near the resort gates for widening the road to the buildings. Other stories indicate that the site was former burial ground for Dutch soldiers. The pot-like buildings became a minor tourist attraction due to a part of their unusual architecture. The structure have been the subject of a film used as a location by MTV for cinematography, photographed by people and becoming a subject in online discussion, described as a ghost town or the ruins of the future. The buildings were scheduled to be torn down in late 2008 despite the online petition to retain one of the structures as museum. Demolition work on the site began in December 2008 with plans to redevelop the site into a tourist attraction with hotels and beach facilities. By 2010, all of the UFO houses were demolished and the site was in the process of being converted into a commercial seaside resort and water park. In 1560, Cardinal Inigo di Aragona commissioned the construction of Plaza di Avalos in Procida, Italy. This palace was to become his residence, and as such it was meant to be an impenetrable fortress as well as an elegant Renaissance residence. In 1734, the Bourbon took possession of the Procida, turning it into a hunting site. Toward the end of the 18th century, after the proclamation of the Napoleon Republic, the Plaza di Avalos was closed and abandoned until 1818, when a military school was established at the behest of the Bourbon, who in the meantime has returned to power. In 1830, the structure was transformed into a penitentiary. The floors were removed to create the kitchen, the cells and common areas. The large portals were walled up and a moat was dug near the country yard to provide light and air to the underground prison, where the individuals considered to be most dangerous, including political prisoners, were held. Finally, the hall on the upper floor was used as a prison chapel. The other sections were added to the fortress, including a large factory, a wing to the house the families of the guards, and the director's villa. Starting in 1946, the prison housed also some prominent fascist figures. The cells of Plaza di Avalos were occupied by prisoners until the 1970s and were then transformed into a repository for rios and skinks. In 1988, the structure was permanently closed and sat abandoned for more than 30 years. Today, thanks to Plaza di Avalos Association, the complex can be still visited. Crossing the entrance gate into the crossyard, you will see remains of the offices of the freshmen and the marshal workshop, warehouses and barber's room, who had the task of shaving the prisoners' heads. The last entry for this iceberg, Willard Asylum. In 1869, Willard Asylum for the chronic insane opened near Seneca Lake in New York. The facility was built as an alternative for the prison and poorhouses that typically housed patients suffering from mental illnesses at the time, where were residents often chained to their beds and locked in cages. In the 19th century, people suffering from mental illnesses had a few options. If their family couldn't or simply didn't want to care them, they were often forced into almshomes or prisons. In 1869, however, Willard's Asylum was opened as a revolutionary treatment facility. Rather than locking residents away, the goal of the doctors and nurses at Willard was to treat patients and teach them the skills they need to rejoin society if and they were able to. The first resident to arrive at the facility was a woman named Mary Road, who came from the kind of situation Willard was built to save people from. Road was suffering from dementia and had spent 10 years in a country poorhouse and chained. Willard thought that the staff made sure she was dressed and groomed every day. They treated her like a human being instead of an animal. Almost immediately, both her physical and mental health began to improve. Willard was trying something different and it worked, but the facility was still a product of the times, and today many of the asylum's practices would be considered horrifying. Those brave enough to enter the eerie grounds of the facility can also see what happened to the patients who died there. The morgue and the crematorium were still largely intact as well, with the autopsy tables standing next to the rollers where the bodies were kept. The asylum's cemetery is full of graves marked with not names but with numbered metal plates. In the facility's earlier days, it was seen as shameful for a family member to be associated with a mental health institution. Such none of the 6,000 graves contained names. Today, efforts are underway to identify the thousands of souls buried in the asylum's ground, but the process has been slow because of the lack of records. However, the stories of many of these residents still persist regardless. We are at the final tier, tier 10. Kiev abandoned subway. Every day, dozens of people descend into the bowels of Kiev subway, take trains between a long-known station. Well, before the war. However, the secret side of the metro lies between brightly lit points of the stations and stays hidden and unknown to us. A trio of unused metro stations that see a train pass through but never stop. The first train station is Vlivska Brana. Is the best known of the three ghost stations. Work on the station began in the early 1990s as part of the northern extension of the M3 Suretsko-Pecherska line, but due to the lack of funds and indecision about the ground level entrances to the station at Lviv Square, work on the station stopped. Telyuchka is the second ghost station on Kiev Metro. Work on the station began in the early 1990s as part of the southern extension of the M3, like the same line, but due to the industrial nature of the area, the decision was made only to build the shell of the station. Herzen is the least developed of the Kiev Metro ghost stations. The construction of the station began in the mid-1990s as part of the northern extension of the same line under the working title of Zagorovskaya. The economic downturn led to the progress stalling, with the decision made to abandon the provision of the station and the site. Garcia Moreno Prison in Ecuador is an infamous 140-year-old prison converted into a museum after it was shut down in 2014. Has changed little since then. It now offers visitors a glimpse of the less picturesque side of Ecuador. The squalid cells have been home to many dramas and colorful characters. On the 2-hour tour through the facility's dirty rooms, the museum guides, many of them former guards, run through the highlights. The facility is located in San Roque neighborhood in the south of Quito, an area where sex work, drug, and crime deter most tourists. Throughout the museum, you see plenty of curious visitors come through the doors. Garcia Moreno was shut down due to rampant overcrowding in 2014, and its 2,000 incarcerated people were transferred to the prison across the country. Onsong and Hoeryong political prison camps. The Onsong concentration camp was an internment camp in Changpyeong, Onsong, North Hamgyong, North Korea. It housed approximately 15,000 political prisoners. The camp was officially known as a concentration camp number 12. The Hoeryong concentration camp was a camp in North Korea that was reported to have been closed down in 2012. The official name was Kwaliso Number 22. The camp was a maximum security area completely isolated from the outside world. There's not a lot of information about these camps and barely any pictures, and I don't know what I'm going to show you, but you will see it. The Tower of Babel was the world's first skyscraper, as well as a symbol of the might and hubris of the ancient city of Babylon. The enormous building mentioned in the Bible has fascinated generations upon generations, although everyone has their own image of what it looked like. Historians have only been able to agree on the thing that the tower was said to reach up the sky. The Tower of Babel stood at the very heart of the vibrant metropolis of Babylon. In today, that's Iraq. It was a city of open quarries, broad boulevards, and narrow, winding lines. But the city of cities, as Babylon was known by ancients, eventually fell into ruins, and the residents of Babylon plundered the Tower of Babel and used the bricks to build their own houses. Long ago, the once mighty Babylon and its gargantuan tower sunk into the sands of Iraqi desert and disappeared. Archaeologists have been working ceaselessly and successfully since 1811 to excavate the capital of the ancient world. It was aerial photography, however, that provided the first real clues as the location of the tower. The photographs show the tower square outline in the center of the city. Today, nothing remains but a watering hole. The tower was said to be almost 100 meters tall and was dedicated to the Babylon's own god, Marduk. But even he was powerless to save this once mighty city. The Mir mine, also called Mirny mine, is an open-pit diamond mine located in Mirny, Sakha Republic, in the Siberian region of eastern Russia. The mine is more than 525 meters deep and has a diameter of 1,200 meters, and it's one of the largest excavated holes in the world. The hole is so big that the airspace above the mine is closed for helicopters because of an incident which they were sucked in by the downward airflow. Mining began on 1957 in extremely harsh climate conditions. The Siberian winter lasted 7 months, which froze the ground, making it hard to mine. During the brief summer months, permafrost would become mud, turning the entire mining operation into a land of sludge. Buildings had to be raised on piles so that they would not sink. The main processing plant had to be on the better ground, found 20 kilometers away from the mine. The winter temperature were so low that car tires and steel would shatter and oil would freeze. During the winters, workers used jet engines to burn through the layers of permafrost or blasted it with dynamite to get access to the underlying kimberlite. The entire mine had to be covered at night to prevent the machinery from freezing. During its peak years for operation, the mine produced 10 million carats of diamonds per year, of which a relatively high fraction, merely 20%, were of gem quality. The mine's enormous output was not considered with the relatively small size of the mine. By the 1970s, when the Mir should have been producing smaller and smaller quantity of diamonds, the Soviets were producing an increasingly quality of gem diamonds. After the collapse of the USSR in the 1990s, the mine was operated by few local companies until 2004, when the mine was permanently closed. The Christ of the Obese statue in San Fruzzo, Italy, is a bronze likeness of Jesus Christ made by Guido Galetti. It was placed upon the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea as the honor of Dario Gonzat, the first Italian to use scuba diving gear. It was installed 17 meters under the water, where it stayed till this day. Similar statues have been placed underwater and above ground all over the world, some as a homage to the original,
others as a mere copycats. The original clay statue from which this first sculpture was cast is now in Ravenna, Italy, National Museum of the Underwater Activities.
Since the construction of the Denver International Airport was finished in 1995, the newest airport in the United States since the 1970s, there have been a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding it. Many of these theories are somewhat supported in a loose fashion by various aspects in the airport, from the art that there is the sheer number of non-used buildings and airplane hangars. There's a lot of videos that talk about the Denver airport and its conspiracy, but we're here to talk about the abandoned terminals. The airport's home to a number of tunnels, including a tram that goes between concourses and a failed automated baggage system. That all sounds normal enough, but there is definitely something weird about that automatic baggage system. Mainly that it costs a lot of money and then was never actually used. The system, which failed pretty spectacularly when it was first tested and just never got better, was one of the reasons for DIA's delayed opening. By 2005, most of the airport's concourses had abandoned it totally, making both its bloated price and long delays feels like even more of a failure, or at least a really weird way to cover up the building of a tunnel. It's strange how the Mariana Trench is at the bottom of the iceberg. Well, yeah, it's an unexplored location and all, but it's a pretty popular place. But I don't make the iceberg. The depth of the Mariana Trench makes it one of the deadliest places on the planet. It is 11,000 meters deep, which is almost 7 miles. However, covered in darkness, water temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius. What it makes it near impossible for life as we know it is to exist is the extreme water pressure. 8 tons per square inch increases with depth. Any air-filled crevice of human body would collapse in a blink of an eye under this pressure. The lungs filled with air would collapse and the bones would crush. Mariana Trench is the deepest location in the Earth's crust. The trench was formed after a collision of 2 tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the Mariana Plate. One plate is forced under the other plate, with the other denser oceanic crust sliding down into the mantle. Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research development wing of the Imperial Japanese Army that undertook lethal human experiments during the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II, commanded by General Shiro Ishii, an officer of the Kwantung Army. The exact number of men and women and children who died within the walls remain unknown, but conservatives estimate that the place is around 7,000 deaths. In the decades since, what has come to be understood is that every single one of Unit 731's prisoners of war, the vast majority of whom were Chinese, died while being held in this camp in Pingfang, just outside of the city of Harbin. Almost all these deaths were in horrific fashion. Prisoners were alternately infected or bombarded with the plague of anthrax and other highly infectious diseases. Then they were vivisected without anesthetics so that military scientists could explore the efficiency of their new weapon of biological warfare, all of which seem to have been explicitly designed to be involved in the Geneva Convention. Unit 731's ugliness was long-lasting to a global in scope. Many of the scientists involved in Unit 731 went to prominent careers in the post-war politics, academia, business, and medicine, while documents show the United States Army helped keep the matters of this human experiment quiet in exchange for being let into the data of the Japanese science that's collected. And this concludes the end of this iceberg. If you made it this far, tell me what would you like for next iceberg or some other type of video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.